Hey everybody, happy Monday and welcome to another Techstrong TV broadcast. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon. Today is Monday, April 18th. I hope everybody had a good Passover if that's what you celebrate, or Easter if that's what you celebrate. We're going to get things kicked off on today's show, which has some amazing discussions, I will say. The first one is a conversation between Alan and Brandon Traffenstedt, who is the Senior Director in the Global Technology Office at CyberArk. CyberArk recently released its annual threat landscape report. A lot of great takeaways in this report, but one of the things that they did notice is there is a direct connection between rampant cybersecurity debt and imbalanced investment decisions. And it is a really great kind of barometer for what a lot of organizations are going to be dealing with if they don't actually really take heed into what type of cybersecurity investments they need to make in 2022. It's a great conversation and it's a very interesting report. I do suggest you check it out. After that, we have the lab, our annual update on what's happening over at GitLab by Brendan O'Leary. As always, he's got a lot of great things to say in his little update, so this one is absolutely no exception to the rule. So after that, we've got the Haunted Hacker podcast. In this one, Mike Jones is speaking with Richard Thiem, the legendary Richard Thiem, who is a former priest who became a commenter on technology and culture. He's also founder of ThemeWorks, which is a consulting firm, and I love the name of the company. They talk about all things cybersecurity, and Mike is just very, very generous in his accolades regarding Richard Thiem. So it's definitely a conversation you want to check out. After that, I'm back with the headlines, and then I have a conversation with Olivier Godin, who is the CEO of SonarSource. We talk about the possibility of the rise of the chief coding officer within organizations. It is a critical strategic asset. We all know that code is gold for many, many organizations, but organizations are dealing with any number of issues related to code, first and foremost being application security, and they're giving rise to things such as the software bill of materials. Well, Olivier and I talk about how a chief coding officer can help kind of mitigate a lot of issues that organizations are experiencing regarding their code. They can really be stewards, if you will, of source code and of software. So it's a great conversation, definitely some food for thought there. After that, I've got the webinars preview, and then we have a double shot of our Something Old segment. These are two smaller discussions that occurred at the recent Predict 2022 virtual summit. The first one is a presentation by Paul Porter, who is the VP of Sales Engineering at Everbridge. Paul's discussion or presentation is titled State of DevOps, Now, Next, and Beyond. He explores the evolving trends in DevOps practices, including its opportunities and challenges that they bring. Good stuff, good presentation all the way around. He's got 4 or 5, maybe, well, I think it's 3 actually, points that he makes during his discussion, but it's definitely a great one. You want to check it out. After that, the second presentation is by Rob Hirschfield, who was the CEO over at RackN, and his presentation is titled Adding IAC, or Infrastructure as Code, Missing Ingredient. Collaboration. So whether organizations can turn infrastructure as code into scalable infrastructure pipelines, what the secret sauce is for organizations to do that. So Rob kind of talks about what that is and how organizations can achieve it. Infrastructure as code is definitely a very hot topic these days, and Rob's got some great takeaways for you there. All right, that's it. That's a great lineup today. I'm actually very excited about all of these conversations and discussions, and we are going to get things kicked off right after these commercial messages.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Inotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Inotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Inotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Inotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Kicking off today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have a conversation between Alan and Brandon Traffenstedt, who is the Senior Director in the Global Technology Office over at CyberArk. They are discussing some of the results of CyberArk's annual Threat Landscape Report, which, among things, finds a direct correlation or connection between rampant cybersecurity debt and imbalanced investment decisions. Good stuff. It's a great conversation. Let's roll it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV interview. My guest for this interview is a first-timer here on Techstrong TV. It's Brandon Traffenstedt. I hope I didn't mess that up. Traffenstedt.
Oh, you got it.
Got it? Good. Hey Brandon, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Happy to be here, Alan.
So, Brandon, you're with CyberArk. I mean, CyberArk's a fairly well-known security company. I would imagine most of our audience is familiar with them, but maybe there are some folks who aren't. Why don't you give us kind of a little CyberArk background and maybe a little bit of like what your position is at CyberArk and your own story?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So, Alan, CyberArk is an identity security leader, from securing any identity that has above average access, whether it's existing in an on-prem data center or whether these identities are floating around in the cloud. We also look very intently at how to reduce risk on the endpoints, as well as going all the way into those pipelines that are running those modern CI/CD processes today. So quite a bit of coverage, but laser focused on the security of the ever widening gulf of sensitive identities. CyberArk has been crazy enough to keep me around for around 7 years now. I'm part of CyberArk's Global Technology Office, so we focus on aligning CyberArk's technical strategy with trends we're seeing in the market, and also stuff that organizations actually need, not just building stuff that we think is cool. Sometimes it gets me into trouble, but I do have a technical background. So before CyberArk adopted me, I've worked in systems engineering as well as on the development side of things and product management. So I've been around the block a couple of times and sat in a number of seats, from end user to working on the vendor side of things.
Very cool. Absolutely. So with that being said, really what we want to talk about today is CyberArk's annual study recently came out. And, well, I'm going to let you tell them. Tell us about the annual study and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So yes, we just released our annual Identity Security Threat Landscape Report. And there were a number of very interesting, not completely surprising, but very interesting contrasts that came up as we surveyed, chatted with respondees, and also put things together. Really, I'll classify them into sort of four main trends that we saw. The first is just the incredible rapid movement of digital transformation. And you're listening, you're like, yeah, Brandon, duh, organizations are changing. But the interesting contrast here is that whereas 99% of the folks we chatted with said their organization fast-tracked the digital initiative, when we chatted with security professionals, 79% of them said, yeah, we're totally moving super quick. We're shifting left, adopting cloud workflows, doing all that stuff. But security is being brought in a little bit later. It's being considered as an afterthought to these initiatives. Now, Alan, admittedly, that could be related to the expectation of constraint. When we're moving really quickly, there may be a perception that when security is brought in, when it's needed, it'll only slow things down. So there's a lot of concern around being more proactive with security as part of that transformation. The second trend we saw was the sheer explosion of identities, but also the trust around those identities too. For instance, every human, the average human workforce member, me, has access to 30 applications and accounts these days. 30 of them. I tried to list the ones I have access to in my brain, and maybe CyberArk doesn't quite trust me enough for 30, but we're putting a lot of trust into those human users. And then 52% of those humans have access to sensitive assets and data. So over half of our workforce has access to some sort of creamy, nougaty data that threat actors will likely be pretty into. But the real big piece here is the explosion of non-human identities. Alan, the machine uprising, which we've seen, right, for the last, half decade with the rise of automation and RPA. But what we found is that non-human powerful identities, or just identities in general, outnumber humans to a ratio of 45-1. For every one human, there are 45 machine or robot identities. And then the trust is also really leaning into the non-human side of things, with a contrast of 68% of those non-human identities have access to sensitive data. And I'll stop here by saying, with identities expanding, with transformation happening, I think we all expected robots to play a big, big part of that. But the way this trust is beginning to almost operate in a binary nature, this increase in trust of the machines, that's causing a lot of our respondents to really consider how they bring the same level of controls they do for humans to their robots as well.
Yeah. I don't know if it's something in human nature, or just like something maybe we're conditioned with, especially those of us in the tech industry, right? Like, and this is something I've noticed, just people watching, right? People who are not in the tech industry, you ask them things and they'll say something like, oh, my computer screwed up. My computer made a mistake. My computer, it's the computer's fault. And people in the tech industry know that as smart as computers are, they're relatively dumb. They do just what they're told to do, right? And so if they're not doing what they're told to do, it's not the computer's fault. Maybe there's a bug in the software. Or more than likely, it's human error. For whatever reason, we tend to trust the computer, the machine, more than we trust humanity, right? When we talk about automation, which is such a big part of digital transformation, right? How do we go digital? Well, we automate more, we could go faster. Kind of unwritten in there is that humans can't go fast enough. To really do automation and digitally transform, we need to turn the wheel over to the machine and let these robots, machines, computers, whatever you want to call them, let them loose, right? Because they could go a lot faster than just skin and bone, neuron-based humans. And again, there's something, I think, in that says, well, that makes them much more trustworthy, or that makes them less fallible, or that makes them, right? We don't have to have the level of identity, access controls, and everything else that we, because people can impersonate humans. Humans can impersonate other humans. And we almost are blinded, right, to the ability of people to impersonate robots or machines or non-humans. And I think that's like a bias somehow that got built in here that we need to overcome.
Yeah, very, very well put, Alan. And I think you've double clicked on the notion of consistency in controls across machines and humans. And it's a silly story, but I have a Roomba. I love my Roomba. The thing runs around, vacuums at all hours. I've given that Roomba an explicit level of trust to just run around the house, do its thing when I'm here, when I'm not here. Now, if we contrast that with me showing up, Alan, at your house with a vacuum cleaner, knocking on your door and saying, I'm going to vacuum every Thursday. All you got to do is give me the key. You'd be like, that guy is out of his mind. Get out of here. But one of the points you made there, and something that we found in the report here, again, it's not a surprise. It's just increasing in scale, is that we're also applying additional trust to the folks who are responsible for automation and for code. As an example, our responders said that 80% of them said that their developers are over-permissioned as well. Admittedly, developers do need powerful access, and I'll submit to everyone listening that it's incredibly important to provide as much operational benefit to developers on a security front as you can, but they're an extension of a lot of these non-human processes that we're trusting. And folks like developers, as well as other sort of targets that work with the endpoints that are connected to our orgs, they're becoming targets of the two most common attack types these days, which we found were ransomware, attacks of opportunity, that kind of thing, as well as attacks on organizations' software supply chains, which I think goes back into that notion of automating, of securing code and that kind of thing. The interesting part about looking at the software supply chain is that's one of the most beautiful connections between human and non-humans, either if you're an organization that builds software and technology and has your own internally delivered SSC, or you're a consumer consuming from any number of vendors who make up your supply chain. Right there, we saw that 71% of organizations had some attack on an element of their software supply chain that resulted in asset compromise or data exfiltration. We're looking at the human side of that as well as the non-human side. So in a lot of the breaches that we've seen since SolarWinds, yes, public code repositories, artifact compromise, open source compromise, but things like phishing, powerful developer identities still make up those attacks on the supply chain too. So an interesting dichotomy when we look at that relationship of human to non-human identity and access.
Yeah, no doubt. Just the whole phishing thing is, it's crazy. How, from when I first became aware of phishing, I don't know, 12, 14 years ago, right? And to see that it's still out there, and it's still, you know why it's still there, Brandon? Because it works. It works, and that's the bottom line there. Another thing is, and I wonder if this is kind of borne out in your research this year, is, with COVID, right? And yes, so it gave birth to digital transformation, and part and parcel of that is sort of this work from anywhere on anything kind of mantra, right? Where I don't care whether you're in your house, at your mom's house, at your grandma's house, or at the beach, or skiing, or I don't really care I don't care whether you're on your phone, a tablet, or whatever, however, by means you connect electrons. I've got to give you everything you need. Whether you're a developer or not, quite frankly, I got to give you everything you need. And I may not, especially in COVID, I may not even have any kind of visibility into how locked down your device is or how secure that is. But regardless, job number one is getting you on, right? And getting you productive.
Oh yeah. And sorry, Alan, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that had to have, someone's got to pay the piper here for this, right? Someone has to answer for Santino, Carlos. And, somewhere along the line, this has got to bite you.
And well said. I think everyone has a pandemic story around the security team chasing people out of the office as we're going home, saying, "Let me install one more agent on your laptop." fact of the matter is, to your point, hybrid work, it's not going away, and it's incredible. Being able to do creative work where you're most comfortable is glorious. It's actually one of the reasons why in this report, we saw that the biggest cybersecurity risks for our responders were hybrid work models. Because being super comfortable has its benefit. It makes our brains work better. It's incredible. But also, sometimes it has us let our guard down a little bit. And being these beautiful mechanical elements of trust that humans are, when we're in comfortable spaces like our houses, I submit to you, we're more likely to trust or be affected by urgency. It's funny that you mentioned hybrid work, but also now we're looking to external vendors to give them powerful access as well. So we're trusting more vendors, right? If hybrid work was number one, then things like the increased outsourcing to remote vendors, elements of lower trust than our own internal employees was also a big, big deal for the responders inside of the report here. And I'll tell you, folks are making good decisions. So I know I've talked about a lot of inferences that sort of paint a picture of growing cybersecurity debt, we'll call it. But if we start to look at the things that folks are doing to mitigate this risk, nearly every organization is adopting some principle of zero trust frameworks, right? And I think that's tied very, very closely with those hybrid work models as network perimeters have broken down. Things like the network access element of zero trust, or the workload or data security elements of zero trust being affected by a lot of the recent breaches that we've seen as an example. But one of the areas that I think is very common amongst all the workflows that we've talked about today, Alan, is the identity. And when we start to look at a zero trust framework, identity-centric zero trust, right? Something like strong authentication for those users who are working from the beach, and also a certain degree of jealousy because they get to work from the beach, is something that can be implemented rather quickly and provide a ton of value. So we're seeing orgs adopt these principles of zero trust, but the challenge they're having is finding the right piece or combination of pieces to reduce the most risk. What we found is that for the folks looking at the identity-centric side of things, we still had some work to be done around protecting identities across business-critical apps in the cloud. For instance, organizations in the report said over half, or slightly less than half of them said, "Hey, we don't have any identity security for business-critical applications or for the cloud." So we have the right mentality, right? We've got these incredible ideas. It's prioritizing and also doing so in a way that I think matches the speed of innovation that organizations are taking, going back to that point of fast tracking digital initiatives. So I think prioritization here is key, especially as we get to this sort of, and some might disagree with me, but also this level of happy stasis with hybrid work. Right? We've recognized that folks are going to work externally. We've provided a lot of the framework for doing it. Now's our chance to begin to fine-tune elements and look at areas of risk that maybe we were hurrying to adopt hybrid work models that we didn't get a chance to touch on.
Agreed. Brendan, we're out of time, man. Hey, for people who want to maybe download the report, find out more about it, where can they go?
Just head over to cyberark.com. You'll see all the information there and available. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, positive, negative, anything like that, your own findings, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Very cool. Brandon, hey, thanks for coming up on here on Techstrong TV. We look forward to seeing you again on soon one day.
My pleasure, Alan. Thank you as well.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong. We'll be back in just a moment.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got the monthly GitLab update from Brendan O'Leary. The lab is something we do on a regular basis, monthly as a matter of fact, and Brendan gives us an update on all things going on over at GitLab. It's as always, lots of really interesting things that Brendan has to say, so let's go ahead and roll it now.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Lab, a monthly show where we look at the latest and greatest developments in software development, DevOps, and the cloud. I'm your host, Brendan O'Leary, and I'm coming to you today from a rather drenched, we've gotten a lot of downpour and rain recently, Annapolis, Maryland, on the East Coast of the United States. And for those who don't know me, I'm a developer evangelist at GitLab, which means I get to talk to amazing folks throughout the software engineering space about what it really means to get code shipped to production. In today's episode, we've got a special treat for you. Really excited. Of course, we're going to talk about the latest GitLab release, GitLab 14.9, as we do every month. But we also have some new information about new partnerships and features and a new partner program expansion. Say that 3 times fast. And I'm going to be joined later by 2 GitLab leaders, GitLab Alliance's manager, Mike LeBeau, and GitLab's Senior Director of Channel Programs and Enablement, Ed Sapoulas. They'll join us later in the episode to discuss the exciting new partnerships and what they mean for GitLab users and partners alike. But first, let's dive into some key updates around GitLab itself. This month on the 22nd, GitLab 14.9 was released, as we do every month on the 22nd. And there's a lot of course, great features in there. But as always, there's a few that kind of really caught my eye and I'd really like to talk about a little bit. I think one of the biggest ones is the ability to link an epic to another epic. So that kind of seems like a small deal at first, linking issues to each other, if they're related or blocked in some sort of relationship has been around for a while. But the ability to do that with epics is going to really enable teams to better track and manage all the dependencies that their epics have across their various GitLab groups. And that effective management of dependencies is really a key component of helping to reduce the variability and increase the predictability of value delivery for teams that are large and small alike. So really excited to see that. We also have a new rule mode for scan result policies. So now you can use rule mode to design and edit scan result policies yourself without the ability to edit the detailed YAML. So this is a new UI editor that makes it a lot easier for users who might not be familiar with YAML, but want to create and manage the rules around MR approvals and how those scan results are handled that get triggered when there's a certain threshold of vulnerability or something else that was detected in the MR. So I think that's going to be a huge value add for security personnel or other folks that want to be able to edit and set those rules, but don't necessarily want to learn a whole new YAML syntax in order to do it. I'm really excited to see that come. Another thing that kind of is along the same line of approving is the deployment approval on the environments page, and actually a redesign of the entire environments page. So now there's this ability to say that you have to require the ability to approve the deployment before it moves to the next environment. So say from testing to staging or staging to canary or canary to production, right? Or whatever your environments look like. So that was added in 14.8 in the API, but now if you're a deployment approver, you can view all the pending deployments and approve them right in the environments page. And so this enables our work to let teams work together and create workflows for approving the software into production that match their regulated or protected environment schema. And so with this update, we're going to say this feature is now in beta. Also in 14.9, there was a huge update to the page itself so that you can answer key questions about your environments and deployments. So now you can easily see the status of the latest deployment, the status of the various environments, and which commits have been deployed where. So that's really exciting. Another really exciting thing, something that you know is near and dear to my heart, are the DORA metrics. And in this release, we added API support for time to restore service, which is the third of the 4 DORA metrics that we've added into GitLab. So this data will help teams continuously improve their ability and stability, right? That time to restore service, or MTTR, is critical to understanding the stability of your product in production. And so I'm really excited that we're one step closer to having all 4 of those DORA metrics trackable directly in the DevOps platform that is GitLab. So that's really exciting. And one more security update that caught my eye was this concept of integrated security training. And so GitLab provides this, comprehensive set of security tools that identify, all kinds of different security issues with it. Maybe it's with the container that you're building, or with the dependencies you're using, or with the code itself that you've written. And those findings come at us in, merge requests and in the vulnerability report. And when it's possible, there's a recommended solution that's given. However, that's not always possible for, a given finding that doesn't have a set solution. And so we want to make sure that we're presenting guidance there, explaining the potential impact of those problems. And so this new integrated security training functionality is going to go a long way in helping developers and everyone understand, in their workflow, what is the actual issue that's been detected here. And there's 2 new partners involved in this, Secure Code Warrior and Contra, that are providing that training content that's going to come into those places. And that's one of the reasons I've asked Mike and Ed to come here today and tell us more about those capabilities that these partners are bringing to GitLab, and then other ways that GitLab's partner program is growing. All right, cut this right here, but we'll segue in.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, so very excited to be here today and share some more background on both these 2 new security partners, as well as the Alliance program in general and how it's growing. So Contra is an application security training provider that provides GitLab developers with access to Contra's interactive examples for both common weakness enumeration, CWEs, as well as detailed tutorials on how vulnerabilities can lead to a security breach. Their proprietary content efficiently communicates the security impact of bugs and ensures that developers' experience with the static application security testing, the SaaS tools, is seamless and engaging. And best of all, Contra's offerings allow users to customize trainings to closely mimic real-world issues that they face within their own company. The other partner is Secure Code Warrior. They're a developer-driven, security-minded learning platform that enhances real-time secure coding guidance, which is pivotal to detecting and fixing vulnerabilities efficiently. This is one of GitLab's several partnerships that further embed security into the developer workflows, assisting them to rise to the challenge of creating a higher standard of code quality. The current culture around the role of the developer and security best practices is, in most organizations, limited at best. However, with true developer enablement implemented in a way that makes sense in their world, organizations can ignite a passion for cyber defense through secure coding, maximizing developers' productivity and code quality. Simply enable security training for your projects, select your preferred content sources, and then view the results from a security scan. In the vulnerability finding, you'll find a direct link to the security training that most closely matches the particular security issue and the specific language or framework in which it was detected. So now developers can spend a few quick minutes reviewing targeted, context-relevant training to address security issues as part of their normal development workflow.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because, again, like the context, relevant, I think is a really important thing there, right? I always fancy myself an amateur developer myself. SaaS could come up with something, and I'm like, I don't even understand what this is or why it's a problem. And so, bringing security training for developers and understanding how to write secure code right to the point where they're writing code. I mean, that's just incredible. So I think these integrations, might tell us a story. Like, what do you think the future of a DevOps platform looks like around security because of that?
Yeah, a DevOps platform that is strengthened by our close collaborations with Alliance partners that are helping customers optimize their DevOps performance. It's only going to be more complete, more interoperable, and integrated more into the developer workflow. Our recent partnership announcements with Secure Code Warrior and Contra exemplify that this kind of collaboration can expand the capabilities of an end-to-end solution while delivering that promise that the one DevOps platform provides. Last month, we highlighted an integration with our security partner, Resilient. So they bring the ability to determine if the vulnerable code is exploitable or not, which helps our customers avoid rework to remediate vulnerabilities with little risk. So essentially, you can potentially reduce your backlog of vulnerabilities up to 70% with this technology. And you're not just reducing you're not just identifying which vulnerabilities are exploitable versus non-exploitable, but you're also reducing that backlog in general. So the amount of vulnerabilities that are out there that are exploitable, you're limiting that overall attack surface area. GitLab's cloud native and cloud agnostic integrations and capabilities enable our customers to tap into new technologies that fit their specific needs, making GitLab an even more dynamic platform that fits various organizational needs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I remember back in the day when I worked for a government contractor, you would hit a security scan and you'd get 195 new things. And the question would always be like, well, does that code even run? Can you even get to that? Right? Like that code is it even exploitable? Given all the other constraints on the system is a critical thing to think about. And so that's amazing. That's really awesome. Now, we also have Ed here with us because, I've heard that there's new, a couple of announcements we've had around the GitLab partner program and updates there. Ed, could you tell us a little bit about this certified training partner certification and what that means for our partners?
Sure, Brendan. So just about every single GitLab customer can benefit from training. Sometimes, our core certification type of training meets the customer needs. Other times, customers want a more tailored approach, like a workshop. Our partners are in a great position to be able to deliver on both of those models. So the CTP program is designed to help our partners build and offer GitLab education services easily and quickly, kind of leveraging our GitLab licensed courseware and delivery methodologies. We also support the partners as they develop their own education offerings around GitLab. So a lot of them are building their own kind of flavor of GitLab around a specific use case. So this training certification is recommended for partners who currently offer training services in their portfolio with validated learning and development capabilities for other similar software vendors. As you'd expect, we do look for partners that have a record of delivering excellent customer experience through their training services. So after becoming certified, these certified training partners can sell and deliver GitLab branded services directly to customers, enabling our customers then to earn their GitLab certifications. It's important to point out our GitLab professional services team is never going to be able to grow to support all the customer needs. So this really is a great opportunity for our partners and their professionals.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. What does that really mean for the program in general, the partner program in general? And then what does it mean for, an everyday GitLab user that we're adding in these kind of capabilities and certifications?
So, we already, partner with a lot of systems integrators, managed service providers, resellers, and distributors, across the globe. They help our customers maximize, value through their services, such as implementation, optimization, managed services. So this certification empowers our partners then to evangelize, the DevOps platform and upskill their customers. It's really important to understand that, as they help our customers, learn more about GitLab, the customers are, accelerate their GitLab adoption and, very importantly, expand their use cases across the DevOps lifecycle. That's the piece that I think really helps our customers unlock the value of the platform. So, the developers often need help implementing the technologies and best practices to improve the quality and speed of their software development. Training advisory services help our customers focus on developing software, not the tools. And so, we know that GitLab is, the DevOps platform, that offers end-to-end capabilities in a single application. That means, that GitLab users get the most complete solution on the market. and enables them to develop software efficiently, really deliver better software faster. And our partners are in a great position to offer guidance and education to help the customers get the most from their GitLab investment.
Yeah, that's fantastic, right? I think that's the story we're talking about with a lot of folks as they're, seeing this platform adoption happening. How do we adopt more of it? How do we, again, get more return on that investment? Because, those folks that still think of, GitLab as just a few things or, just Git, it's like, okay, well now, if you have the Git DevOps platform at your disposal, what does that mean? So that's fantastic to see that we're doing that kind of enablement. Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you, Mike and Ed, so much for coming today. I really appreciate your time coming on the show and talking about us. Would love to have you back sometime next time we're doing, exciting partner announcements. So thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Great.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So that'll wrap us up for today. Again, if you want to learn more about GitLab 14.9, as always, I would encourage you to go to the GitLab blog. There's over 40 updates. We only covered a handful of them per usual, but if you want to learn more about it, go check out the GitLab blog. And thanks for watching again today. You can find me on the internet as @O'Leary_Crew most places. Twitter is probably where I spend most of my time. So if you have an idea for a future episode or want to discuss anything else from today's episode, reach out to me there. Really excited to talk to you about anything else you've thought of. And again, this is the lab. We meet here every month. So we'll see you here next month for the next GitLab release. Thanks again for joining us. I'll see you next month in the lab. Stay safe.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
All right, we are back. Next up, we've got the Haunted Hacker Podcast. This is a two-part conversation, part one of a two-part conversation that host Mike Jones has with Richard Thiem, who is a cybersecurity consultant, a former priest, became a commenter on technology and culture. He's also the founder of ThemeWorks, which is a consulting firm, and he's a frequent keynote speaker, and he's a legend in the field, and Mike has a great time having a conversation with him. So, like I said, this is part one of a two-part conversation. We'll have part two tomorrow, but let's go ahead and roll part one now.
Welcome to the Haunted Hacker Podcast version April 0.2. This is the second one for this month already. Crazy. Before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of news and updates. I'll be speaking in Washington, D.C. on the 14th at the Techstrong live event and teaching people how to hack Android phones. The Haunted Hacker threat intel report, kind of a bait, went out today. And you'll see a lot of RF and radio signals between Russia and Ukraine that's been published in that threat report. So take a look at it. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to a very fascinating guest that we have today. We're really lucky to have him. Richard Thiem. How are you doing, Richard? And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's always great to have a good conversation with a good human being.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and fascinating background, and tell us kind of how you got into cyber and your journey and what you've been through.
Okay, let me try to keep it as short as I can because of necessity, my complex journey. I mean, you live long enough, right? Mm-hmm. Old buildings, whores, everybody gets respectable if they live long enough, according to Noah Cross in Chinatown. At any rate, I was an Episcopal clergyman, right? And before that, I taught English literature, and I loved literature. Once I found it, I couldn't get enough of good literature, how it was constructed, complex, beautiful, and as close to the truth as a human being can articulate. Right brain, not scientific truth, but truth nevertheless, and a comprehensive truth full of feeling and full of nuance and subtlety. So I loved literature. And I taught it at the University of Illinois. And I changed my path in my late 20s, nearly 30, went through some life-changing experiences. And the best way to handle those was to join the Anglican Church. I was living in England. And I came back here and became an Anglican clergyman. And I did that for 16 years in 3 different parishes. And because of my unique background, I've lived as a minority in 5 different ways. So I'm used to encountering cultures that are not mine, and learning how to suss out the context out of which they speak, live, and move, but usually without knowing it. Because if you've never, I'm in Minnesota right now, and people who grew up here don't know that epistemology and ontology are the same thing for them. They think what they think is real because they're so assimilated by the culture. But I learned to see past that, because you have to, as a minority, whether African-American or woman or Jew or what. This is about the first generation that I used to say you could be express your anger at how you're treated without being killed for it. But that's changing. Once again, you can be killed for it. But women always, because violence was private at home for women. So I had a unique trajectory and did very, very well in the ministry on the edges of things. Meanwhile, I bought my son Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, an Infocom game years and years and years ago. We loved Infocom. I thought it was going to be the way of the gaming future. But as you know, I mean, since nobody's shot dead, it isn't. There's nothing but shooting in games that seem to proliferate and go wildly popular. But Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and some of their others like Trinity were just works of art, just beautiful interactive fiction, which, because I knew fiction and done a lot of writing, I thought this is where it's going to be. And I was playing that game with my son when I realized that this really was the way of the future, that interactivity was going to be the determining structure of how humans related at a new level, which was digital. Now, because I knew literature, I had a good sense of how text works. And my perception playing that game was, what is happening to me, I remember thinking, is not the same as when I read a book. A book discloses a horizon of possibility through the text. The digital world discloses it through branching, if this, then that, junctions and options that make a different perspective. And it seems to go on forever. It seems like when you did those interactive games that the options were endless. They weren't. They were constrained. But it felt like they were endless in a different way than literature, which defined the parameters of your vision. And so I thought, my God, this is going to be totally different. Religion, which I was articulating on behalf of a community at the time, religion is literature. Religion is based on words. Religion is based on literary transactions in a community. People don't often see it that way. But religions, as we understood them, come from the printing press. In other words, way back when, there were oral religions, right? Christians called them Baals, which was a way of making them all wrong. But there were just a lot of religions, and they were oral. And once writing took place, it transformed human consciousness. And now oral religions either vanished or were translated into writing. And then that huge meta leap took place again with the printing press, which is why we have Protestants. There wouldn't be any Luther. Luther is a a digital human now, a digital being. He was a print being, but translating it into digital, again, transforms it. And I thought, this is going to be as big as the printing press. This is as big as writing. And I start writing essays. The first one was called Computer Applications for Spirituality, the Transformation of Religious Experience, on how the structures, forms, ideation, everything in what we thought of as religions is once more going to go through a looking glass of absolute transformation. Well, I couldn't get that published. They wrote it wrote in the margins when they sent it back from the Anglican Theological Review, he must be crazy. He's mad. Who does he think he is? Literally, that was one of the steps toward I can't stay in a suffocating environment where people can't comprehend reality. Because I saw bing, 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 what was going to happen. I see the future sometimes more clearly than I see what's right in front of me. But I connect the dots. And so finally, a new editor found that essay and published it and said, this is so cutting edge. But my tech friend said, it's not cutting edge anymore. You're referring to moos and mushes. You remember those? Mm-hmm. Just it was archaic, my technical references, but the insight on how it was going to transform human interaction, religious structures. Now it's all here. A lot of what I said is coming, has come, but because it came gradually in the context of the digital transformation of society entirely, people almost didn't notice how radical the change to have satellite churches and interactive sermons and so on and so forth. So I was being offered the jobs I thought I always wanted. It takes a while for cognitive dissonance to build. You got a good career, you got golden handcuffs called a pension, and I realized I would die if I took the jobs that were offered. Bishop of Connecticut was one. Trinity Boston, the biggest church in the Episcopal Church orbit. And they came for an interview, and the guy said afterward, he said, you've got everything we want in a new leader, but one thing. And I said, what's that one thing? And he said, we got the feeling you don't want us. And I said, boy, you got it. I don't want you, and I don't want any other parish. I'm out of here. It wasn't quite like that, but that's how it felt. And I was out of there. And I announced to my wife, I said, it's over. I felt perfect peace. God called me in, God called me out. Long live God. And so I left that structure and said, I'm going to speak and write full time and dedicate myself to articulating what I see and see if there's a place. Well, that was 1993. And you could do something commercially on the internet in 1993 for the first time. It had been prohibited prior to that year. And so I could have a website. They were brand new. USA Today found my website, called it a website of the week. That's how few there were. And I was asked by the Wisconsin professional engineers, they said, we hear about this thing, cyberspace. What is that? Would you write a column for us telling us what it is? So my first column in what I called Islands in the Clickstream, places to stop and pause and reflect on what this is that's happening, was called What is Cyberspace? And they said, oh, they loved it. Could you do another? So I did one called Dreams Engineers Have, and then I did Games Engineers Play, and so on. And pretty soon I said to friends, there's this thing, email. Can I attach these columns and send them to you? Within a couple of years, they're going to 60 countries and thousands of subscribers. And Singris approached me at DEF CON and said, can we bring out a collection? And at the age of 60, 2004, that was my very first book, collection of 150 Islands in the Clickstream columns. So also, I say they approached me at DEF CON. You cannot underestimate in my history the importance of DEF CON. I wrote to Jeff Moss when he was preparing DEF CON 4, and he had put out a word that somehow I got through email. I'm looking for a keynoter. And I said, oh, I talk about this stuff. And he said, well, sure, come on. You know, his genius, among other aspects of his genius, is he gives people a chance. And if it works, he keeps them. And if it doesn't, he doesn't. But people love to go to DEF CON and volunteer for no money to please let me be here and serve you and make you a millionaire. So that was the deal. We all agreed, and no resentment about that. The payoff was tremendous. Last year, I spoke at DEF CON for the 25th straight year. Wow. I don't think anybody's done that. And each year, it's a challenge to come up with a new way of framing on the basis of what I said I saw, the revolutionary transformation of society through digital communication and information technologies. So this is what I have thrived on and what I've loved. Plus, I met a lot of people there from NSA and CIA who became the closest friends I would say I've ever had. And I'm just thinking of them. One died, one has Alzheimer's. Tragic, but I used to spend hours and hours and hours in conversation with these friends, and even did some work along the way for different places where they worked but above all, learned how things worked in their world. Mm-hmm. And so the security world, I've now keynoted conferences, security conferences in 15 countries. And for me, bringing what I did from the ministry, the bottom line is what I love is the exchange of information and energy for people, with people, and trying to make those transactions win-win. I did an early talk at DEF CON about social engineering, and you can raise your game from win-lose to win-win. You still win, but if you make it profitable for other people, it's called society, right? I mean, then it works for everybody. And I've gotten to know people all over the world, and I can't imagine a better, more exciting, more vital community than all the various people in intelligence and security with whom I have been privileged to engage and learn from. So the bottom line is I am the dumbest, most ignorant person in the room every conference I go to. And that's why I learn more than anybody else. Because if your cup is half full, you can only fill it another half. I come in empty every time, come early, stay late, and I have learned from colleagues and friends over almost, it's 25, 30 years almost.
That's amazing.
How to think in this world. And I love it. I love it. And it's cutting edge. And it challenges you constantly to accept the ambiguity and complexity of the world in which you live. Don't get high horse on anybody. Don't get moral high ground on anybody, because the world is 100% gray. And in the ministry, I knew that and lived out of it. But there were some people in the religious world that, no, it's black and white. No, it is not. And if you think you have a clue, the first sign that you might have a clue is when you realize that you do not have a clue.
Exactly. So you have a lot
that's the short story, believe it or not.
So you have a lot of background that really fascinates me. When I was a little kid, the first thing I ever wanted to be, and this is probably news to a lot of people, the first thing I wanted to be was a priest. And so I dove off into, the Catholic religion and Catholicism. I've been around the world to different religious sites, in Cyprus, and I went to Buddhist temples in Singapore, because religion really fascinates me, because it's a collection of stories, plus it's symbology, and it talks about human behavior and psychology. So it kind of all played into kind of like my development. But what I found really interesting is when I started going outside of those lines a little bit and looking at some of the more esoteric and some of the more non-mainstream, followings like Freemasonry. I became a Freemason in 2005 and was excommunicated from the Catholic Church for doing so. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about, the different religions, why we do certain things that we do. But, when you said that religion took on another context as far as like the digital transformation, what I thought was really interesting was, even when I was a kid, there was a series of books called Choose Your Own Adventure.
Of course.
And it was a science fiction book, and you had different alternative outcomes based on your decision making.
Of course. We all did those, right?
Yeah. And I think religion has the same context as well. Like there's totally different paths you can go depending on which choices you make in life, right?
Absolutely.
But what I found over the years is that the more I got ingrained with the internet, the more I got deep into some of the darker spaces and some of the lighter spaces, is that it's definitely taking on a life of its own, and it's affecting a lot of lives in the process. You talked about the shooting games, and that seems to be the trend. And it kind of scares me, the way that we've revolutionized technology, the way that we're really embedding it, not only in our own minds, but our bodies and everything around us. It kind of paints a scary picture. When you think about EMPs, you start thinking about cyber attack and the different routes that people are going. And the fact that, I just did a documentary about kids in gaming. And what I found really interesting is you can put a kid in front of the game and they'll get addicted to it. You take them away from that game and they're a completely different person. You have to go through that withdrawal, and they're frustrated and they're angry, but they play that out in a game. So where do you think that gaming and technology is going for the younger generations?
Well, one of the things if I'm with you, I mean, I'm tracking all the different points you made. One, I want to say about the esoteric paths. I have a hunch that anybody who takes seriously the spiritual path on which they set forth will wind up exploring those varieties. And I certainly did. I went to the human potential movement stuff. Part of my experience in England when I joined the Church of England was to try to make sense of what was happening, which was you could only call paranormal. Mm-hmm. And now that I've gotten to be friends and acquaintances with people who did remote viewing, and I did exercises in church. You can imagine coming to a class in my church in Utah, and I said, we're going to do psychometry. Everybody holds an object, receives psychic impressions, and then reports out. And the point was that I wanted to make sure people knew that their boundaries are porous and that information and energy is constantly moving from us to others. And you pick it up unconsciously, but the more conscious you become of what you pick up, the better you get. And the more intuitive you get, and ultimately you wind up all the way at non-local consciousness, which is what the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14, said to me. He realized coming back from the moon was what exists. He would go in and out of an altered state. And in the altered state, he saw that everything is interrelated. Everything connects with everything else, which we now know from physics is, of course, true. And non-altered is what we're doing now, which is we see things as separate. Well, apparently it's very easy to use separate things to build and make stuff happen, i.e. society. You can't have nothing but mystics, right? Because there'd be no buildings. We'd just all be gone. We'd all be ecstatic and non-functional. So you have to have a mix. How many mystics can a society tolerate? Well, that's what genetic engineering is going to show us. If we tweak the DNA of embryos to make more mystics, it may skew society in the wrong way. But the point I want to make is, the esoteric path, the deeper experience of consciousness and what it can disclose when you open yourself to that, that's what spirituality and religion was about for me. And therefore, I did thrive by attracting people who wanted to go adventuring in spirituality. Now, I said, as I realized what was happening with young people, is I could see clearly the difference between the digital world and the print world because I happened to live on the cusp between them and understood how text works and how writing had transformed human consciousness because I had been uniquely placed, like at the Terminator on the moon. You know, where the Terminator is, you'd see light and dark, you see rills and craters. But when it's all white, you see nothing. When it's all dark, you see nothing. The Terminator on the moon is like the cusp between major cultural change. And I could see what was coming because I had a foot in both worlds. And I would flip back and forth, like Edgar Mitchell said, between them. But I could see that the next generation, and here we are several later, is going to be so assimilated to the digital world. And you can tell that's happening when all the parents are moaning. They won't get off their games. Well, I remember a guy named Tubby. I wrote a little column about it once way back when. I said, now they call him Mr. Tubby. I was told to go to Tubby, who was always reading, always inside reading. And they said, try to get him outside playing sports. Well, now he's Mr. Tubby, the CEO of a major technology company. And the point is, young people assimilated into that way of doing things, being, thinking. They're integrated into it the same way we didn't think it was unusual to read. But if we look back at history, we were part of a brand new kind of society where people were literate. You go back to the early 20th century, most people didn't graduate high school. It was a very big deal. But to really read and be literate is only a very recent phenomena for society. Well, it's the same with digital. They were assimilated and people would say, oh, they're not going to be doing X, Y, and Z. Well, they're not. They're not. I mentioned the movie Chinatown. I got in trouble doing a talk for O'Reilly when I said, it's Chinatown, Jake. It's Chinatown. And the woman who was handling me came up and she said, none of them know what you were talking about. That movie is from 1973. And then I have to think, my God, next year it'll be 50 years. And when a hacker came up to me at DEF CON, I referred to Hal. I can't do that, Dave. A hacker came up and said, who's Hal? And I realized that my points of reference were ancient. And this was confirmed when somebody tweeted at DEF CON, "You may think Richard Thiem is just a deranged old man wandering around the con, but he still has some good things to say." And I said, "Thank you for sending me that. I think it's a compliment." I didn't know they thought I was a deranged old man wandering around the con, but now I just turned 78. I'm writing my 8th book. The book that came out last year is the best ever. I'll just mention it's called Mobius, a memoir. After 25 years of working with all the people to whom that I referenced, the friend at NSA said, you can't ever discuss what we talk about unless you write fiction. He said, fiction is the only way you can ever tell the truth. And he was right. I've published 37 short stories and 2 novels, and I'm working on my sequel to Mobius. I poured 25 years of understanding into the story of an intelligence professional who hit a speed bump and became a whistleblower. And now the second book is, what is it like to be a whistleblower? And I've talked to plenty of them. And then there will be a third, I believe, completing the trilogy, incorporating some of the spiritual depths that I've never been able to speak about because consensus reality just doesn't allow you to talk about those things. And so as I've moved into these other domains of understanding, I have lived more and more in non-consensual reality, understood and sustained and created by a small group, an elite. And by getting interested in UFO phenomena, which I did as a priest when a fighter pilot told me, "Oh, it's real, all right. We chase them, we can't catch them." So I spent 44 years pursuing as much truth about that as I could, and that takes you into non-consensual reality in a big way. Finally, government says, "Oh, yeah. The other day I was talking to somebody, and they said, she said, I was talking to the guy across the table. I said, "What do you think about all this Revelation stuff from Luis Elizondo?" And she said to me, he said the same thing you just said. And what I said is, it's real. It's been here for a long time. We've known it for a long time. And it's a serious security confrontation and threat. And I found out who she was referring to, who said the same thing I did, was Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, my sources go in many directions and all the way up. And so I don't have any question anymore. I haven't had any question for a long, long time. We've been visited, we've been observed, and people say, "Why don't they communicate?" I said, "Do you know what a UFO is?" It's just, "Well, sure." Yeah, in other words, they've communicated. This is it. Here we are. We're just going to show you here and there and everywhere, and you're going to put it together over decades because your little paltry timeline, little monkey boy, is not our timeline. And, you have to think very, very differently to try to grasp the strangeness of the phenomenon and how it manifests itself. Because for one thing, the technology is so beyond what we could grasp, which was the threat initially. And we don't want anyone else to get that because then they own the earth. But the other is the impingement upon consciousness. More and more people, I've interviewed so many who've had encounters, and they sometimes say, I changed my life. I'm going to be a priest. They become profoundly interested in in environmental issues. They have a profound spiritual transformation as a result of even a simple encounter with a glowing 30-foot disc that hovers over their car, stops it, and then moves on. I want to explore what I've learned about that, and I've learned a lot more than most people get a chance to learn from interviewing people. So that'll be the third book. So I passed over into an acceptance of the fact that my audiences and my readership are going to be people who they want to know how the intelligence world really works. They want to see the meat on the end of your fork, naked lunch, William Burroughs called it. See reality for what it is. And that's what I've been passionately committed to in literature, in ministry, and the last 30 years of my life. So it's expanding your consciousness, right? It's taking literally and seriously what you discover to be deeply true. And once you discover it, it changes you forever. And you can't go back and pretend you haven't had an inside-out transformation, because you have.
Yes. It's really fascinating too, because coming from intelligence industry, I was intelligence in the military, cryptologist, and that kind of background. Plus, I've always been interested in radio, trying to listen for any kind of rogue sounds or signals or whatever I can collect. That whole questioning everything. And you spoke about remote viewing, which I find really fascinating, because as a kid, I started having the ability of being able to tell where people that I was connected with, what kind of environment they were in, whether it be, a table in front of them with a glass, or I could tell them exactly what they were wearing. But it was because I think that connection between the two people. I still do that sometimes. I still have the ability to, be able to call someone and say, hey, I know what room you're sitting in. This is what it looks like. And it freaks my mom out. But it's something that I enjoy. And it's a gift that I had when I was a kid that I never really understood. But as I got older, I realized that I have those connections because those people are close to me, and that connection exists.
You got it. And that's what I discovered in the ministry. The people for whom I genuinely cared as deeply as I could, we had such a connection. There's a joke about, I knew they were going to call before. That happened so many times, it wasn't even noticeable anymore. I did these classes called The Invisible World to show people that the paranormal is normal. It's not paranormal. It's a human condition and facet and attribute, which, if you do not believe it exists, will not happen to you.
Right.
And that's the key thing, to know that it's not seeing is believing, it's believing is seeing. One of my favorite examples of that is some women have a chromosomal alteration that lets them see more colors. And this one woman who became an artist would tell her parents when she was a child what she saw, and they said, you can't see it. And she stopped seeing it. And then when she learned that it was scientifically valid, she began to see it again, and now she sees all the colors. In other words, her brain got the message. You may think you're seeing it, but you're not. So I'm not going to show it to you anymore. And then it got the message, that was a mistake. Let's look. And so what I'm wanting to know is, once you discover that you have an inclination or intuitive understanding, you're describing clairvoyance and telepathy, do you then and this is what spiritual practices are, they're training programs to deepen the tools and techniques of going there and doing that and experiencing that. And so have you done anything personally to enhance, sharpen, hone, clarify your ability to do it? And yes, people do freak out. So what I learned in the ministry, even though I wasn't always psychic, but you were very intuitive, when I first started doing counseling, I thought, I can see what's happening. And I would tell them what's happening, and they'd run screaming out of the office because they couldn't handle it, right? So I had to learn. I needed to know, see clearly, but say to myself clearly, and then find how to make that apparent to other people, tell them in a way that's helpful to them. That's what counseling really, really was. Yeah. But if you've got the gift, you don't want to not just let it happen to happen, but you want to enhance the likelihood that it will happen, because if nothing else, it enriches your understanding of how deeply interconnected we are, right?
Oh, exactly.
That's a great gift. I mean, I was tempted to test it. I was going to turn off the camera and ask you what kind of slacks I'm wearing, but
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we take a look at 15 DevSecOps practices DevOps is all about speed, agility, and collaboration. But when it comes to security, DevOps teams often face unique challenges. From securing the application development process to protecting production environments, DevOps and DevSecOps teams need to be aware of a variety of potential security risks. This article is a list of 15 DevOps security best practices and challenges, some more obvious than others, but all worth considering. There are plenty of threats when it comes to DevOps and DevSecOps, and equally, a wide range of best practices that can be used to improve DevSecOps. By implementing these best practices, you can help protect your system from attack. We also have an article about Argo, the popular open source tool that enables GitOps with Kubernetes. But it's much more than that, because by enabling GitOps, Argo will also make Kubernetes environments more robust, secure, and reliable than ever before. Combined, Argo, GitOps, and good DevOps engineers are a recipe for production panacea. This article covers what the Argo project is in relation to GitOps and Kubernetes, some of the requirements for Kubernetes in production, and the benefits of Argo tools for production environments in helping make Kubernetes production ready with minimal effort from developers and DevOps engineers. The magic of Argo is its simplicity and the way it fits seamlessly into existing Kubernetes workflows. Also on DevOps is an article about MTTR and why it is a vital metric for DevOps teams. In DevOps, every second counts. We all know that. System failures mean engineers lose valuable time improving software and developing new features. So how do you effectively detect and manage these issues? Mean time to resolution, or MTTR, can provide insight into how effectively your DevOps team responds to incidents and how reliable your software is. It's difficult to know how your team can improve or determine a performance baseline if you don't have data to analyze your incident management workflows. This article offers up information on this valuable metric, including how to interpret it and leverage this information to minimize downtime. All right, over on Container Journal, we look at the new CRY-O vulnerability and how organizations can best it. If you're a CRY-O user, you need to know about CVE 2022-0811, which was recently discovered by CrowdStrike cloud security researchers. While it can't be exploited by just anyone, it can still wreak havoc in your cluster node. This article discusses what the vulnerability is, what it does, and how organizations can not only close the gap, but also be more prepared for a growing threat landscape. How serious is this vulnerability? Well, CRY-O users, particularly those in Red Hat environments, will want to take action, as will anyone with multi-tenancy clusters, which by nature means different groups of users who shouldn't be able to reach other people in the cluster. Good stuff. All right, in news, VMware has made generally available an update to its Tanzu application platform that makes it easier to deploy and manage application workloads across multiple Kubernetes clusters. In addition, VMware includes support for pre-built container images that make it easier to migrate existing applications to Kubernetes environments. Version 1.1 of Tanzu application platform also adds modular installation profiles to simplify deployment and the ability to instantly visualize workload status across a software supply chain, as well as added support for role-based access controls to better secure the cloud-native application development and deployment platform. The overarching goal of the new features is to provide a superior experience that entices more developers to build and deploy container applications on Kubernetes clusters, as many developers are still reluctant to deploy applications on Kubernetes clusters because the primitives that need to be mastered are still too low level, at least when compared to other application development frameworks. All right, over on Security Boulevard, the U.S. government last week tried to get ahead of possible attacks on industrial control systems, particularly in the energy sector, via the recently discovered Pipe Dream malware, which is a modular ICS attack framework that is equally dangerous to industrial software and industrial technologies. A joint cybersecurity advisory issued by the Department of Energy, CISA, and the FBI noted that certain advanced persistent threat actors have exhibited the ability to gain full system access to multiple industrial control system and supervisory control and data acquisition devices. Noting that the bad actors have created custom-made tools that target ICS or SCADA devices, the agencies said they can scan for, compromise, and control affected devices once they have established initial access to the operational technology network. The government is particularly worried about organizations in the energy sector, as the modular architecture and ability to conduct highly automated exploits against devices make Pipe Dream particularly dangerous, although there is no evidence of compromise just yet. The APT actors can scan for targeted devices, conduct reconnaissance on device details, upload malicious configuration or code to the targeted device, backup or restore device contents, and modify device parameters, the agencies noted. And finally, we look at the recent attack on Panasonic Canada by the Conti ransomware gang, which said it grabbed 2.8 gigabytes of data. The ransomware group posted what appeared to be internal documents from Panasonic Canada, including from its HR and accounting departments. Spreadsheets and files were among the information published on the Conti leak page. A Panasonic business has been hit by attackers multiple times in the last several months. In the first attack, Panasonic was hit during a string of attacks against Japanese companies. The attackers accessed sensitive documents, customer and employee records sometime in June 2021, though Panasonic did not pick up on it until November 11th. That attack was followed by an intrusion during which bad actors accessed information on job candidates. Panasonic India also suffered a ransomware attack at the end of 2020. Panasonic confirmed the most recent breach, but has not attributed it to any specific group, nor has the company provided much in the way of details. All right, that's it for the headlines for today. I will be back tomorrow with a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Olivier Godin, who is the CEO of SonarSource. Olivier, thank you so much for taking some time and joining me today. I do appreciate it.
Hi, Charlotte. Thanks for having me.
No problem whatsoever. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about SonarSource, and then I'd love to talk to you about this idea of the Chief Coding Officer. But first, please do tell us about SonarSource.
Sure. So SonarSource is a company that was founded now 13 years ago. In Switzerland, today we operate out of 4 offices. One in Austin, Texas, where we have about 70 people, 20 people in Bochum, Germany, 20 people in Annecy in France, and about 180 people now in Switzerland, which is headquarters.
Wonderful.
So yeah, and what we do is we do what we call clean code, which is we provide solutions to help companies to do a good job when it comes to the source code of applications. And we have been doing this for 13 years with a solution which is mainly open source, with a really, I would say, massive adoption across organizations.
That's wonderful. And we've been hearing so much lately about open source software security and the need to have clean source code. It's kind of the fundamental, if you will. It's the basis for any successful application, software application development project and delivery. So I'm interested in this idea that you have come up with, which is the rise of the chief coding officer. And I wonder if you can kind of walk me through that. What do you mean by the chief coding officer, and what do you envision this person doing?
Sure. So basically, before I get into the chief coding officer, I think I would like to start from the idea that source code is really the main asset for software. If you think about software, I mean, everything is in code. I would arguably say, I mean, some people would argue, I would not, that anything in a software is commodity disposable, which is everything important in a software is done in the source code. So how the software behaves, how the software performs is going to be in the code. And therefore, if you think about code, this is a real asset part of the software. We keep saying software is eating the world. Actually, we could almost say source code is eating the world somehow. And if you're not careful, I'm sure you heard a lot of stories about people having to deal with technical debt, with unsecure applications. If you're not careful, what is supposed to be an asset for companies, this kind of soft things that you can make evolve to support your business can become, kind of often becomes more a liability, which is, this is something where you have to do this, you have to do that before you are able to add the next feature to support the business. You are going to have to fix certain things that have been overlooked throughout the years. Sure. Developers don't like they don't really own the software because the code is not as good as they wish. And sometimes they say this and they wrote themselves the code. I mean, I think most developers one day said, oh, who wrote this code? And then they realized it was themselves. So basically, there is this idea that source code is really the asset. This is the most precious thing in software. And once you start to think about this, there is nobody really today who owns the code in organizations, which is, and I have seen in large organizations, people starting to have roles such as CDOs, like Chief Development Office, which to me is more around the development process itself to make sure there are good practices when developing software. But I also think it's extremely important that somebody in any organization is going to be the one making sure that we take good care of the source code.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, developers.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon and I'm here now with the webinar's preview. I always tell you, we have so many webinars, great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Well, I got 3 here for you. Hope you can join us. They're all awesome, and they are all happening, I believe, this week or next. The first one is called 2022 Container Security Trends Expert Live Panel Stream. No, expert panel live stream. There we go. This one is happening Wednesday, April 20th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is sponsored by Sneak. The cloud is where applications run today, but the cloud itself is software managed and run with code such as infrastructure as code, Kubernetes and Helm configs and Docker files. Securing your cloud can and should follow much the same model as the security of the apps you're running in it. So in this webinar, Techstrong research analysts will share some new research on securing cloud environments, containers, and the need for greater visibility and collaboration between engineers, operations, and security teams. In addition, a subject matter expert from Sneak will discuss some of the challenges and successes they have observed from teams applying developer-first security practices to their cloud-native infrastructures. It's good stuff. Right, the second one is called Building High-Performing DevOps Teams. This is happening Wednesday, April 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This is one of our DevOps Unbound panel discussions sponsored by Tricentis. To improve software delivery performance, the first thing organizations need to do is improve their DevOps team's expertise. So DevOps doesn't deliver code by itself. It takes a great team to do it. So how can we help our DevOps teams become high performers and foster innovation? What makes an effective DevOps team, and what does the future hold for DevOps engineers? This panel of experts will discuss the role of DevOps, the demand for DevOps engineers, and the main principles and practices that DevOps teams should apply to achieve high performance. A great, just kind of down in the weeds, DevOps engineers conversation. Good stuff. All right, the last webinar is called Getting HashiCorp Terraform into Production. This one is happening Thursday, April 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. This is sponsored by AWS and HashiCorp. When starting their migration journey, many small teams adopt the Terraform open source software to provision their clouds using infrastructure as code. As teams expand, organizational challenges arise around collaboration, security, compliance, and governance. So this webinar discusses the benefits that Terraform Cloud offers customers who are considering Terraform as the standard workflow to provision and manage infrastructure in their organization. Another good one there, folks. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview for this time around. I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new batch for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great day. And please, whatever you do, stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, we are back. Rounding out today's Techstrong TV broadcast, we have a double shot of something old segments from our recent Predict 2022 virtual event. The first one features Paul Porter, who is VP of Sales Engineering at Everbridge. Paul has a conversation titled State of DevOps, Now, Next, and Beyond. It's actually a presentation, not a conversation. Talks about basically the state of DevOps. It is what it says. The second one is by Rob Hirschfield, who is the CEO over at RackN. Rob's presentation is titled Adding IAC, or Infrastructure as Code's Missing Ingredient, Collaboration, and how organizations can successfully integrate infrastructure as code into their scalable infrastructure pipelines. Great stuff there. Both of them are totally worth checking out, so I highly encourage you to do that. We're going to go ahead and roll one right after the other now.
Hi, my name is Paul Porter. I lead the global technical sales team with X Matters, which is an Everbridge company. And excited to have a chat with you here today about what's coming in this next year. And so I'm going to actually share some slides here. So let me cut to the slides so you can get a view of those. And the context of this is really DevOps, because we've been here already. So I think what's coming is really a function of where we've been. So I've got a little bit of the now, next, beyond perspective. And for me, customer experience, user experience has really been the focus. Actually, not this year, but from about 3 years ago or so is really when it started. And for us as an organization, we really think of everyone in the company as participating in customer experience. So customer experience isn't just what you see on a web interface or in an app, that sort of thing, but it's really much larger than that. But it certainly was highlighted when COVID hit. So a pandemic definitely changes things. And from our perspective, it became even more important that customer experience and the virtual end of it became a great new focus. So I'm going to touch on that and revisit a little bit of history so that what's in my context from where did this start, where are we now, as well as, of course, where are we headed next. And in this customer experience realm, one of the true things I think for most organizations is that they always needed more faster. And what that more of was kind of depended on you as a company, kind of what industry you might in, what product or service you may be providing. But all of it was not only to improve the customer experience, but all that, of course, directly relates to revenue for organizations and brand and identity. We want those to be positive things and positive experiences. And of course, adoption, where there's a model that we expect our clients to roll through. And of course, that relates to satisfaction and retention, not only within an organization, say employee retention, but also from a customer retention standpoint. And I would also group this into digital transformation. So digital transformation really means different things depending on what your organization is. And it came in different forms. For us in the IT world, it definitely was, one of the ways that happened was this move from Agile to DevOps, which is a terrific thing. For some organizations like us, we're a cloud SaaS solution, fairly small company, compared to companies that have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees. And so we were able to actually move our entire engineering organization to adopt DevOps, which is terrific because you got everybody on the same page. For larger organizations, it tended to come in isolated areas or for isolated applications. But it's also true that cloud initiatives were part of digital transformation and continue to be part of that. And then if you go down into even more detail, of course, how you build and deliver those applications, whether you call it a service architecture or a microservice architecture, is able to take advantage of great new changes and technologies. Things like containers, of course, make our lives easier and make things more portable in a lot of cases, or leveraging serverless technologies. This is awesome stuff. And, it's kind of fun to geek out on it and understand what it means. But one of those implications is also a challenge. So while it's fun to have great new toys that make life easier in some ways, there's also a lot of complexity that came along with this. And that complexity meant that we had to adapt. And for some organizations, if you're in this transformation, say, of adopting DevOps, there were really foundational things that you needed to do and you had to pay attention to. And for many of y'all, you've probably seen this before. You may have seen CAMs or CALMs as that foundation. So culture being the first letter of it, and also the foundation you can see in the picture, is most important. It's like if you just jump to automation, in some ways you were just going back to Agile because that was about efficiency, right? And if you didn't have that culture to support it, your automation wasn't going to mean the same thing because sharing wasn't going to exist and maybe you didn't have the right measurements, and, it may not have been lean enough. Of course, this wasn't the only thing. There's also other concepts like the 3 ways. So this is about feedback loops, and not just the old version where you created an app and you gave it to ops, and the feedback loop was a month later or a quarter later. Really, we wanted to narrow these things down so that it was near instantaneous, right? That's the goodness of the model, is to actually get that quick feedback so that we can respond quickly. And then ensuring that we had lean IT. So we took ideas from lean management that, went back to lean manufacturing, if you remember that. So all sorts of goodness that comes into this. So it's not just about tools. It's really about organizations and how organizations changed and molded themselves and then changed their practices to establish this new normal. So the common expectations that we have today are much different than, kind of depends on your organizations, but even 3, 4, 5 years ago, and certainly from 10 years ago, it was dramatically different. But today, we've got a terrific focus, which is a great thing, on customer experience, making sure that throughout their journey with us for whatever product or solution we're providing, we've got customers engaged and we're providing them value. So not only is it smooth, but it's valuable to them. So that's probably an important distinction too. But at the same time, we also need velocity. So we can't just build something and then sit on it for years, or months, or even weeks. It's like, because competitively, the world is changing. And of course, we're also getting more connected, even more so all the time. And then because of the growth potential that we have, we need scalability. And we'd love it to be truly elastic. For most organizations, it doesn't really work that way. You scale up and usually you don't scale back down. But the idea is important, that we want it to be flexible. And the same thing is true of deploying these updates, whether you use something like feature flags so that you can get that early deployment to make sure that it's stable and working, or even potentially pull it back, right? And as opposed to releasing changes and then rolling back changes from actually updating executables and things. Feature flags give you that, greater flexibility, but it's not for everybody, right? It means that you've got to make some significant changes to the way that you're building and deploying those applications. And then, by the way, we also need to make sure all this is secure, no matter where you are in the world, and ensure that privacy and security and trust are maintained in all cases. So that new normal is actually a lot of complexity, right? It's a lot to deal with. And so we have to continue to adapt what we're doing. We can't necessarily throw away everything from yesterday and completely start over. We have to create great transitions in here. And when things go wrong, while we're, trying to juggle, all these different balls or spin all these different plates, however you want to think about it, we also have to respond faster to issues. And the goal being is, like, we know issues are going to come up, whether you think about error budgets or SLAs and SLOs and so forth. And an issue is going to occur. Ultimately, if we can identify it and resolve it before it impacts the customer, that's goodness, right? That's terrific. But it's not always that easy in reality. And so part of this transition was the move from what people called traditional monitoring. And a lot of times it was architecture based. And maybe there's applications and kind of macro level components, but it wasn't great visibility into the environments. And so observability comes along and says, here's how you make sense of this new, much more complex environment. And in particular, there's these notions of metrics, logs, and traces, which allow us to, have the high level, but also drill down and understand, the impacts at a low level, which is great. It's terrific because we need to make better sense of the complex architectures. Although at the same time, my guy on the screen here who's in deep thought, I'm not sure if he has a headache or he's just thinking, but he's got more data, right? There's more information to think about and try to make sense of. And in some cases, it's really information overload, right? At some level, there can be too much. And so we have to make sense of it. And so while observability is a great change for us, it's not really the focus. That's actually just part of the path to the outcome that we really want to drive. And so while, all those details are terrific, the outcome is really something different. The outcome is restoration of service in general. But if you think about breaking it down, break it down into 3 items. So the first item we touched on, it's like how fast can we determine that something's wrong, and hopefully before the client tells us about it. So that's important. And then complex architecture, it's non-trivial, right? So, simple, gross things are easy to find, but subtle things before they're impacting the customer become more challenging. And then once I know something's wrong, understanding the impact to the client, what's the impact to the service that I'm actually providing, whether that's detailed in the architecture, it's like a small bit inside of the architecture, or, is this really, where the person buys a product from my website. It's important to understand that, because that's also going to imply how fast I can triage this issue. What kind of information can I get to it? And then can anyone on my team actually repeat this? So it has to be information that I can gather quickly, but also in an easily accessible manner. Because ultimately, I want to restore that service, right? It's understanding the root cause, providing a fix. Sometimes that fix is temporary. Sometimes it's actually more permanent. But in either case, restoring the service so users and customers can continue on their journey is really the goal on that, right? That's the ultimate thing that we're trying to do better and faster. At the tail end of all this, more features, more functionality, greater scalability, and so forth. So I say all that to tell you where we're headed next, right? So here's, which is no surprise, because this is really all incremental. Like, we keep building on top of what we learned yesterday and the day before. So my point here is we've been talking about customer experience for a long time. We need to shift that a little bit into what I would call customer value. So it's not just how fast does the screen refresh or the web page refresh or the app respond to what I'm doing, but what's the value that it's bringing to the customer? So understanding their journey and their processes becomes really important. And the alerts and metrics allow us to see those impacts, but we have to align them with the services or business services or the security aspects of the solution and service that we're delivering or providing, relate it back to value so that you understand how best to prioritize those things. And then the traces and logs. And then I'd also throw in there change, what changed in the environment in the last minute, in the last hour, in the last day, all that visibility, not just what's happening right now, but also what changed. Like, that's dramatically useful when issues and problems come up. And then, of course, we have to adapt, because the application we built a month ago, a year ago, continues to change. And so we also have to continue to change the way we respond and automate more of that. So all those triage steps that we do all the time, that's, it's back to the rule of 3. If you do it 3 times, you should automate it. Let's build that into how we respond to incidents. So more automation, the same automation we've done in the CI/CD pipeline, for years now, we need to bring that to our incident response. And then automated remediation is leaning into those notions from the SRE model, right? That Google's had, again, for years. But how many of us have really leaned into that to say, let's truly begin to automate those responses and make more of this predictable for ourselves so that we can actually deliver that great experience and bring more value to the customer, but also to our own organizations. And then we also have to think beyond just the technical fix. And in my experience, security is the best example of this. If there's a breach in security or a security event, it's not just a technical fix. You know what? Turns out the attorneys are involved and our marketing team is involved. And there's multiple other teams within the organization that we need to engage as quickly as possible, because oftentimes there may be regulatory requirements or compliance that we have to provide, as well as customer commitments related to any sort of security event. And so the sooner that we provide that awareness, the greater value we're providing to our own organization and eventually to our customers at the same time. So again, I think this is all, a natural evolution. I think that this may not be the exact science of it, but if you think about observability, and if you've heard of value stream management or value stream mapping, understanding where value is in the life cycle for customers, making sure that what we're doing with observability and how we manage the response to incidents and how we automate those responses relates exactly to this notion of value stream management, because we have to understand that severity, the impact, so that we can appropriately prioritize how we resolve these issues and the amount of attention we give to them, not only from a technical level, but also from a business level. So that's where this is unavoidably headed. It may have been obvious to some of you and not so obvious that it's more automation, it's more customer focused, but it's value aligned for sure in what we do. And that's for internal as well as external organizations. So I appreciate your attention today and sharing with us. Feel free to ask any questions, and we'd love to engage with you further. Thanks.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
Hello, my name is Rob Hirschfeld, and we're going to talk about infrastructure as code, or completely automating your system so the robots can take over. And this all started with a Twitter war that I had about what is infrastructure as code. And the answer came back very simply as it's YAML. And so from that context, my presentation is over and you can stop. But some of you might be interested in a little bit more nuanced definition of infrastructure as code. And we're going to dive into that because it really is an important thing to understand, right? IAC, infrastructure as code, promises completely automated infrastructure. And the vendors are making it look super easy and nice, but the reality is that it's a really hard, complex challenge with a lot of moving parts. And so it's important to understand what's going on. RackN has infrastructure as code buried deep in our product. We don't think of ourselves as an infrastructure as code vendor. And this presentation is about our story of using infrastructure as code to solve data center automation problems. And it's core to what we do. And it's been essential for us to build something so that automation was portable site to site, customer to customer, hardware type to hardware type, and not snowflaked out. And that's really what infrastructure as code is about. A lot of people approach it as a development question. So from the infrastructure as code development stack down, they start at the app and they move down and they assume infrastructure does a lot of lift for them. What RackN has done and why we have a really unique perspective about this that I'm going to share is that we really start from the infrastructure and work our way up. And so we drive upwards towards platform as a service. For us, that means digital rebar. A lot of people know Terraform. It's an incredibly popular infrastructure as code platform. And I'm going to compare and contrast them a little bit as I talk through what it takes to build real infrastructure as code solutions. So what we see is that there are 6 really pieces. The first one is YAML, and that's where you would expect to start. It's sort of where the Twitter war started, and it's way too easy of an answer. You also need some type of dynamic infrastructure, a cloud, an infrastructure, a service like VMware, Kubernetes, something dynamic that actually provides resources for you. From there, you also need to have a desired state engine. So you have to be able to have some type of way to say, this is what I want to achieve. Now you've described it, you have infrastructure. That aspect is very important, right? Kubernetes does this really well, sort of the defining piece of Kubernetes. Digital Rebar does it. Terraform, when you create a plan, does it. That's the concept here. And critically, you need to be able to deploy from source control. A lot of people, when they think of infrastructure as code, they think about GitOps, Docker files, things like that. That is very much a part of it, but it's not the only part of it. You also have to have composable automation. And we'll explain why it's important to have modular building blocks and not just see this as I wrote a bash script or I have a linear set of code and I just make things go. That isn't accomplishing what we think of as code and development and reusability and modules. And then finally, you need a CI/CD pipeline. So all of these things stack together in a very coherent way. And you can't do one without doing the other from an infrastructure as code perspective. They all become part of this hierarchy of needs to build infrastructure as code. If you look at Terraform, Terraform has been doing a lot of work in this space. They have a lot of these pieces. They don't do dynamic infrastructure. That's what you bring. It's actually designed to program dynamic infrastructure. And lately, they've been adding some desired state capabilities in their TF Cloud, the enterprise or team versions, which I don't consider Terraform. I consider that a add-on product. It's a new thing, using Terraform as the flagship and the brand, which I think makes sense for HashiCorp. And then, that builds you into a Terraform piece. I'm going to be focusing on what I know best, which is digital rebar, where we've built a lot of these pieces up from an infrastructure perspective. So how we actually build and provision and automate. And then when we get to dynamic infrastructure, we program Metal and run Metal automation. And then we use Terraform and Ansible and tools like that to provide interfaces into the other infrastructure automation pieces. And that's exactly the way you want to do it. Part of infrastructure as code is modular. You don't want to reinvent things that are already working. So is infrastructure as code the right term then, with all these bits and pieces and things that have to come together? It really isn't. It's the term we're using for this broad thing, but it's not a complete term. You might think software-defined infrastructure, SDX, or software-defined data center might make a lot more sense. But those have really been co-opted for infrastructure as a service. What we're really talking about is this concept of a continuously integrated data center, right? That CI/CD component at the top trickles all the way down and influences how you build things at the foundation. And so we believe that a continuously integrated data center is the right concept to pull together all of these infrastructure as code ideas and build out. So what I want to do is walk you through how we think of building a continuously integrated data center. And this is presented with RackN's thinking in part. This is what we know best, is how we've built this. And it's part of our story. So I hope this makes sense to you, and you can take from this very generic lessons, because that's how we're going to talk about it and I'm going to present it. So what we're going to do is really simply break down each one of those layers of the pyramid and give you concrete examples of things that we've had to do that accomplished infrastructure as code for us as we built up towards this whole stack. And the first one is programmatic configuration. For us, that meant Golang templates. You could use any number of different ways to accomplish this. But it meant that our configurations weren't just, here is a list of things that we know about the system, but we actually could pull data in and state in from other parts. And this, to me, is absolutely critical. If you're just saving, here's an inventory list of everything I have in my system, that's static. It's going to fall apart. It's hard to build modular pieces around it. And so when we look at programmatic configuration, it's very important that each piece of configuration can pull in data from the broader system around it, or from automation that comes before it, something that we've been calling automation chaining as a very important concept and is sort of core to the continuously integrated data center. In this example, you can see we actually have ability to have built-in variables. We have conditional logic. We have simple substitution and ways to build that component together. The next thing that we have that's really important is this dynamic infrastructure idea. And dynamic infrastructure implies state. Somebody is building infrastructure, you ask for it, you get it back, you modify it, changes state. That's a really important component for this. And what we've done in the way we look at this is you have to have that state system. That state system has to have a distributed agent framework so that you can pull in information from other places. We call that machines and agents. And we've been extending this concept with some really interesting ideas of agents that can move about in your environment, super fun type of stuff, because you have to have an actor. Right, so the actor acts, the state is reflected, and then you have other ways to consume that state. So through a UX, which is really nice for humans, but a CLI and an API make it incredibly accessible. And that's the core of what the platform does. To us, if you're looking at a continuously integrated data center and you don't have a good story about state, then you're really going to be siloed. And that does not create an end-to-end automated system. From there, and this is exactly what this is describing. So operational systems downstream need to hook into it. Different clients need to be used, right? You should be able to address your infrastructure in many different ways, which is exactly what clouds give you. And that's an important part of how clouds actually provide value, is by having that consistent, accessible API. Just something you want in your data center, in the cloud, on the edge, wherever you're building infrastructure. Consistent, accessible APIs are absolutely essential. From there, we can start building things that start driving us into our target goals, our desired state. So the goal here is not to be able to programmatically build it. You do want to programmatically build up a system, but you don't want to have to ask over and over and over for that. You want something to do it for you. And this is what desired state is about. So instead of saying, I want you to add a disk, I want you to add a name, I want you to, all those tasks as individuals, you want to say, build me a system that looks like this. And the system needs to figure it out. Kubernetes is a great example of that. You provide a YAML file that has your system configuration, and it does all the dragging containers and wiring them together and starting them. That's desired state goal. So if you write a Terraform plan, that plan, when it's processed, gives you a final infrastructure state. Digital Rebar does the exact same thing. You ask for a target state, what we would call a workflow, and then the system coordinates. It builds a list of operations it needs to get done, and then coordinates those tasks to get done. Desired state is really important to make all this stuff happen. And this looks like a lot is going on because a lot is going on. Desired state is not simple. It's not just a bash file that I run and then makes things happen. It actually includes creating data, consuming data, updating other systems as you go. And so when you think about achieving a desired state, you're actually building that state as you go, informing it, using things that you've discovered about that to then inform future steps. There's a lot of discovery in the process of building a desired state system, because a lot of decisions don't get made until you actually begin the process of building that target state. So once you have this idea that I can have all the systems achieving the state I want, the next thing I need to be able to do is do this in a composable way. And that's absolutely critical in how everything works together. Because as infrastructure as code implies, it's not just that I've written it down or configured it and stored it in Git, all those are important, but it's actually that I can reuse components, right? Most of the things that people do in infrastructure, especially in our world, aren't unique or specialized. They don't create value for your company by being a better BIOS installer. And yet in the industry, we haven't been able to make that modular and composable. So the goal of infrastructure as code is that you can reuse the pieces and parts that you have. So for example, as you go through the process, you might have things that set up a disk and inventory the system and update the BIOS and install Weasel as the VMware NetBoot installer and then configure the networking. All of those things are standard components. They're not unique business to business. Sometimes the sequences or the configuration details are, but not the modules. And so it's very important when you look at infrastructure as code, you do it in a way that allows you to reuse each of those pieces and parts so that individuals aren't making those decisions, but standard libraries are, just like you would be doing with code. And then that allows you to then take that and break your content and your catalog into meaningful parts. You might have completely standard operational process that brings up your infrastructure and then specialized content that configures it into a specific operational pattern or use. So the more you can do this, the more faster benefits that you're going to get out of that automation, because you're going to be doing less and less custom automation, more and more standard automation. It's exactly like programming. And infrastructure as code should feel a little bit or a lot like programming, right? Infrastructure as code. So from there, we start getting into something that's really important, which is being able to deploy from source. So I have standard content, I have standard content packs, and they're modular. That means I can start getting composable parts from source code infrastructure and deploying it on an ongoing basis. It's exactly what we propose. It's what it's part of the discipline of using our product that we find really helps people accelerate their operational experience the most. And this is something in your IAC journey you really need to make sure that you understand from the very beginning. These composable parts actually get bundled into units. Those units become what we call content packs. Those content packs are immutable when they're in the system. So if you need to change them, you actually go through a full change control process. And then they're versioned and stamped, and we know exactly what is installed in every site because it's created from these immutable components. And we've been very careful in the code to make sure that those content packs are immutable and reliable. So those go into a catalog. That catalog then becomes available. And so this is a classic continuously integrated data center scenario where you have dev environments working a process, testing a process, publishing that content, and then making it available for wider dissemination into production, multiple customers, multiple sites. This creates robust and resilient DevOps processes. And then from there, you can hook all of that into a pipeline. Pipeline is really important because what we really want to be able to do is have consistent, repeatable results that happen quickly in very small increments. And that's exactly the type of operational work going on here. As a matter of fact, what we've done in our last version is we fully enabled a pooling capability so that you can treat machines as elastic resources even when they're in hybrid or multi-cloud scenarios. And that means that your CI pipeline can say, I need to run a test against a cluster or a batch of machines. It can request those machines, take those actions, and then release those machines in a very cloud-like way. That's important because your CI pipeline needs fresh reset environments, which is really a core component of how we look at infrastructure as code in general. Wow. That's a lot of information, and I've been moving very quickly through it. So let me recap briefly on what we're talking about. What we're looking at here is a stack of technologies that fit together, which is really a stack of disciplines and components working from a programmatic configuration, or YAML, up through dynamic infrastructure and being able to set and reset, train and retrain on this infrastructure, right? Repetition is a critical component of being able to make sure that you've built good automation. If you're not confident that your automation can be reset and restarted, then it really isn't automation, right? It's a helpful script, and I don't consider that to be the same thing. You have to have a desired state engine so that you're not trying to incrementally describe your system, but you can give it the final state. You need to be able to deploy from source code so that any of that work does not involve humans making decisions along the way, but actually verified articles, something we call immutability, and a very important concept. I talk a whole hour, I have talked whole hours on just immutability as a concept. And you can't just do this as a big block of spaghetti code. It needs to be modular so that you can look at small pieces and do work in small units, and that allows you to put all of it into a continuously integrated data center. So how do we get there? This is a whole nother talk, and I want to just give you a little bit of sense on it, right? We've been very technical about how all these bits and pieces fit together, but it's not just about the technology. There's organizational components and thoughts that you have to do as you design good infrastructure as code environments, right? You have to think about the operations and the platform. This is that continuously repeatable component that I was talking about, where you need to know that when you push the button to rebuild your environment, that it's going to work and it's going to do what you expect it to do. So those are very important components here. And the technology has to work in a systems way. What we're talking about here is not, Terraform, get me a machine and then use Ansible to then connect to the machine and then another tool and another tool and another tool. Those tools, we still use them, but you have to look at them as connected and integrated together. And when all that works, you have to know that it's happening. So think about how this grid works. Think about how you're chaining your automation together and how you're building a real system. This is a good foundation to start your infrastructure as code practice. Thank you. I hope this presentation was helpful. If you're interested in more, please check out RackN and Digital Rebar and how we've approached infrastructure as code. Even if the tool isn't the right one for you, our strategies and our thought processes behind building resilient, reliable automation at scale is exactly the type of thing that might help guide you on your own infrastructure as code journey. Thank you.
All right, that wraps up today's Techstrong TV broadcast. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's conversations and presentations as much as I enjoyed bringing them to you. I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new broadcast. Quick reminder, though, but next week we have our first live in-person conference coming up. It is the InnoTech event. It's a one-day IT technology conference covering security, cloud native, all things basically related to IT. This is happening in Austin, and you can check out what we've got lined up for you over at techstrongevents.com. We also have on that site a listing of all the other events that we have planned throughout the year, both in person and virtual. So please do check out what we've got planned for you. Until then, I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new broadcast. So until then, I hope everybody has a great day, and please, whatever you do, stay safe.